Cheating wife tries to poison me until a creepy hobo saves the day. 2 years ago, my wife Angie and I decided it was finally time to buy a house. We knew it was anything but a buyer's market, but we were sick of paying triple what a mortgage would be in rent every month. I'm sure this story is familiar to some of you, and we went through every stage of disbelief, anger, and finally apathy after every competitive offer we put together was blown out of the water by a multinational investment corporation. I'm not mad about the process anymore, although it left me questioning where society was headed. How is this legal? I went to school, I paid off debt, I got a good job, I did everything right, just to still get priced out of the effing city I grew up in. Perhaps some of my anger remains. But after setting our sights on the city's less desirable neighborhoods, we finally got our home. On June 1st, we moved into a 4,500 square foot colonial. It had hardwood floors that patinated like leather, and the frosted plaster trim gave the ceilings the look of a wedding cake. The basement was a different story. It wasn't just unfinished, it was a dank hole in the ground, and scribbled on the walls were strange spirals and crude faces. Kids, the realtor had said, like she knew who drew the markings. Fixing up the basement would be quite a value builder. So, sure, the kitchen had composite counters, and the basement needed a sign above the entrance that read, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here." But we had a home, and a dang big one at that. The catch was that it was a stone's throw away from the freeway, and the area was known for its crime more than anything else. Angie said it was just a stepping stone. We'd bank a year's worth of mortgage, hope the housing market keeps rocketing, and move again in a year. There were some flaws in her plan, mainly money, but I didn't say anything. I figured we'd both adjust to like it there. The first few weeks went smoothly. The wife and I got to unpacking and introducing ourselves to the neighbors. Maybe it was the threat of crime and the belief there was comfort and purpose in knowing who you live next to, but whatever it was, our neighbors were incredibly friendly. We quickly felt at home, and while there were some shocks, we made games out of them to take the fear away. With the pops that permeated the night, we had the game where we guessed whether the sound was fireworks or gunshots. When we passed large turds, one of us would point and we'd play human or dog. Unfortunately, after just a couple weeks at these games, we became experts at differentiating. Gunshots carry the sharp crack of the sound barrier being broken, while fireworks just go boom and then pop. As for the poop, let's just say we hadn't seen any dogs large enough to lay landmines around town. There was a homeless problem there for sure, but they minded their own business. Our neighbors seemed to see right through them. They'd act as if they were ghosts, like they weren't even there. Heck, everyone did. I'd smile and say hello in passing. The least I could do was treat them like human beings. One night after a movie, I was at the sink washing the popcorn bowl. The window above looks out to our backyard, which was heavily wooded for a city lot. When it was dark out, I could only see a sliver of what was outside, beyond the reflection of myself in the glass. I frowned at the shadow of a tall dark stump. I didn't remember a tree being there. I swayed on my feet to see past my reflection. In between the bushes, nearly out of sight, a man was standing still and staring back at me. My heart leaped. I dropped the bowl and it crashed into the sink. "You okay in there, honey?" Angie shouted from the living room. "Yeah," I said, keeping my eyes on the man. I said nothing to Angie, not wanting to alarm her. I simply told her I was going to take the trash out. I walked by the trash without touching it and opened the back door. Outside, the wind was blowing hard, and the branches of the buckthorn that the man was standing behind were waving wildly, as if to warn me. "What do you want?" I asked. The man said nothing. I stepped forward to try and show that I wasn't scared, but it was the tepid step of a prey animal, like I was planting my weight in preparation to run. As I tried to take another step, more confident this time, I jumped, as my movement activated the motion lights. I composed myself and yelled, "This is private property. If you don't leave, I'm calling the police." Now, this was the emptiest of threats, and everybody in the neighborhood knew it. The cops made a point to show up an hour late, if at all. The man walked forward a few paces to where I could see him better. He was very tall, and wore a heavy wool overcoat that stretched all the way to his ankles. He kept walking towards me. My brain was shouting, but I froze in fear. He stepped just in front of me. A white scar showed across his black skin, just below the chin. He was at least 6'6", but it was the coat that ran the entire length of his body that made him look gigantic. His face was recently shaven and gaunt. He held his fist out at arm's length. When he uncurled his fingers, cupped in his enormous palm was a pill. "I don't have any pills for you," I said. His face didn't change any. There was no want or question in his eyes. I realized he wanted me to take it from him. I reached out and gently plucked the pill from his palm. I held it between my forefinger and thumb. It was just a pill capsule. Whatever had been inside had been emptied. I asked him what he wanted. He opened his mouth, revealing the severed stump of a tongue. Then he widened the enormous whites of his eyes. He began to mouth something. But since he was tongueless, I couldn't tell what. Yet my blood cooled, because I felt certain it was some kind of curse. "Please," I murmured. "Please leave." He turned and stepped into the night. I watched the bushes sway in his wake, as if he were a giant parting his way through the woods. The next day was Saturday, and I was determined to find out if anyone knew about this tall man. I walked to the strip mall and asked some of the homeless in the area, but as soon as I began to describe him, they all looked at the ground and shook their heads. This same pattern was repeated with every other homeless person I tried to talk to. On my way home, I stopped by two men working on a car at the end of a driveway. "Hey," I said to them, "this may sound a little crazy, but do you know of a tall fellow around here that wears a giant coat?" They both started laughing. I apologized for wasting their time and turned to go. No, one of them said, waving me back. "You talking about a really big mother lover? Yay high? Black coat, nasty scars?" I nodded. "Well, that's Tall Frank. What you want to know about him? You see him in your recycling? Tall Frank's a can man. He makes his living that way." I nodded. He was acting weird in my backyard last night. "Weird how?" they asked. "Was he just looking like his weird self?" "No," I said. "He was staring at me from outside. When I went out, he tried to say something, or mouth something." Both of their brows rose. "You saying that Tall Frank tried to communicate with you? Tall Frank talks to nobody. And by talks, I mean, well, communicating in any kind of way." The other guy chimed in. "He cut his own throat, just to be sure he'd never talk again." "That's just a rumor," the first one said. "Tall Frank showed up in this neighborhood 20 years ago. No one knows where he came from, and the man can't tell you. Yeah, people put all kinds of legends to those scars. Some say it was a dog that bit him, but I've never seen a dog that'll slice your tongue out." This left me with a question. If he doesn't communicate with anyone, how come he has the name Tall Frank? "Well, that's just what my mama called him," the man said. He leaned closer to me. "She used to tell me to watch my tongue or Tall Frank'll take it." He chuckled to himself. "What do you think he wanted with me?" I asked. They both shrugged. "No clue, but you be sure to tell us when you find out." They went back to their work, and I thanked them and went on. But as I went, I was far less assured than when I'd first set out. Over the next several days, there was no sign of Tall Frank. But I started to worry more about the thought he'd cursed me, as I had begun to fall ill. It was just a headache at first, but soon I had heart palpitations and body aches so bad that I almost let Angie take me to the emergency room. I assured myself that there was no such thing as curses. Why was I letting one strange encounter with a homeless man dominate my every thought? Angie had been working late recently, so I had the house to myself at night. I would stand alone at the kitchen window and stare into the backyard. I was obsessed. And it wasn't long before I saw him again. I was wrapped in a blanket, filling the teapot at the sink, when I saw him standing in the same place as before. I dropped the pot and ran to the back door. My head felt light, and I was in that same kind of drunken state where your fear hardly speaks to you. I scampered through the backyard over to Frank. "What do you want with me?" I asked. Tall Frank was staring at me. He gestured with his scarred neck for me to follow. I looked down at my bare feet, but he was already walking. "Hey!" I shouted. "Just leave us alone!" I cautiously followed after him. When I got past the bushes where I could see the alley, I saw him standing near the trash cans. I ran after him. "You!" I said. "I don't ever want to see you back here again." With our difference in size and the blanket wrapped around my shoulders, I'm sure I looked to him like some sort of angry hobbit. He certainly didn't act intimidated, and I can't blame him. Tall Frank crossed the alley and sat on a crumbling retaining wall. He gently tapped the stone next to him, gesturing for me to sit. "I'm not freaking sitting." I said defiantly. He reached into his breast pocket and paused before pulling out an envelope. Then he put the letter in his other hand and reached in again to pull out another. He extended the envelopes to me, his long arm nearly stretched across the entire alley. I approached the letters cautiously, snatching them away and stepping back. "What are these?" I muttered, already distracted. They had both been opened, and I took the papers out of one of the envelopes. It was a handwritten letter on college-ruled paper. All the ink was smeared, like it had been dunked in water, but I could still read the writing, albeit slowly. When I was done reading, I let my arm fall down to my side and stared at Tall Frank in disbelief. Angie had a lover. I looked at the other envelope and hardly had to read it to figure out what it was. The letter had read, Atlantic Life Insurance. A policy had been opened in my name for $250,000. I stumbled over to the retaining wall and sat. The pills. I thought about the empty capsule Tall Frank had shown me. The capsule that I had tossed aside. It was my emergency albuterol. It had to be. A quick WebMD search showed that an overdose started with symptoms of headaches and heart palpitations. Angie is trying to poison me? I thought. Suddenly I realized that Tall Frank's arm was around me. He was patting my shoulder paternally. We sat there in silence for a long time. "The things you can learn from people's recycling," I said. Tall Frank nodded, and we watched the upstairs light turn on as my wife appeared in the window. She twisted something in her fingers and then tapped it into a mug. A minute later, I heard the back door open. "Honey, are you out here?" Angie called. "I made you some tea." I guess the homeless around here don't always want change. Sometimes they might want to save your life. Maybe this is the wrong takeaway, but if I were this original poster's wife, I'd probably cheat on him too. He sounds insufferable. He wants us to believe he's the only one in his neighborhood who gives the homeless the time of day. Yet Tall Frank is legend enough to indicate that OP's virtue signaling is just blatantly untrue. The interesting part, though, is that a man who can't afford better than a slum while splitting the cost with another person can still be insured for such a high amount. I didn't think that was possible. I also didn't think one dose of asthma medication a day was enough to OD on. And if Angie had been using more, it's weird that OP didn't notice it missing. Am I wrong about these things? Am I a jerk for doubting this story? I'm not, but let me know in the comments anyway. My friend stalked me through my phone. Now everyone thinks I'm the jerk for being creeped out. My friend and I are home from college. I'm female, he's male. We went to different high schools, but we were friends through clubs and extracurriculars. We had a friend group senior year that we both hung out in. The friend group fizzled out, but we stayed somewhat in touch and see each other a few times each summer for lunch to catch up. Anyways, we were on the phone about 2 weeks ago and made plans to chill, grab pizza, and listen to music. While hanging out, we were Snapchatting old friends, and he snapped some of them back through my phone. I don't think much of handing my phone to him so he can reply. I mean, I've been friends with this guy for a while now, so we're decently close. The other day, he texted me, joking about how I need a better sleep schedule since I was up until 4 a.m. I laughed it off and said, yeah, I was up until 6 a.m. studying. I asked how he knew, and he just laughed it off and made a joke. I didn't think much of it because I know Instagram and Snap sometimes show when you were last active on the app. Well, today he texted me joking that I need to charge my phone. I was at 2%, and I was a little weirded out that he knew that. Again, he just laughed it off and made a joke. I asked him what the heck was up. Did he share my location or find my iPhone? He said no and said he'd explain tonight, since we had plans to grab food. I was kind of weirded out, but he kept joking. I checked my iPhone and my locations, and nothing is shared. I then realized that on Snap, he had disabled ghost mode and shared my location with himself. When I asked him about it, he denied it and didn't admit anything until I sent him a screenshot. I told him how weird that was, but he was joking through it and saying he'd see me later. I've been ignoring his calls and texts ever since, and he started spamming me with apologies and offers to pay for lunch. I talked to a mutual friend of ours about it. She was weirded out at first, but laughed it off. She said he was clearly just messing around, and I'm being a major jerk for blowing it up when it was totally harmless. She also said I was a jerk for ignoring his calls and apology texts because he clearly didn't mean anything if he's panicking that I'm mad. I'm not necessarily mad, I'm just totally weirded out that my privacy has been invaded the past 2 weeks. I don't know how to feel. The way you feel is the right way, OP. Actually, you're being pretty mild about it, if anything. I don't know if he violated your privacy on a whim or if it was planned, but you'd be right to worry about which boundaries he'll push next. Maybe he won't. Maybe he's just got a really ill-advised sense of humor. But there's no reason to take the chance when there are better friends out there who won't disrespect your privacy like that. If you do decide to see him again, bring along some asthma medicine so you can put it in his tea if he gets out of hand. I'm told that really wrecks a guy. I put an entitled Karen's phone in the trash compactor, and I don't feel even a little bit bad about it. I had just started serving tables at a restaurant, and I was working my first super busy brunch shift. I had 6 or more tables. I won't lie, I had a tough time running all the mimosas that my tables were ordering. I could tell that one table of all women were getting abnormally angry about their drinks taking a while. I apologized for the delay and made a joke about it being an especially busy shift. I offered them a round of drinks on me to smooth the situation over. When I walked away, one lady murmured under her breath that I was an incompetent C-word. Let's stop there. It's common for people to treat servers like garbage, but this was the first time I had ever experienced being spoken to like I was garbage. I shook it off and continued to be nice to them, but it only got worse from there. They started to laugh at me and trash talk me to one another. They told me that my future career looked pretty bleak, considering I couldn't even serve tables. Honey, even a toddler can deliver drinks. When I took their food order, one woman refused to speak to me. She just stared at me while her friend ordered for her. By now, I'm ticked. I asked her why she felt the need to have her friend order for her. She laughed in my face, looked down at the menu, and said it's because I was a dumb little biscuit. Since I was at work, I couldn't argue or tell her to eat waste for treating me like I was a dog. If I did, my boss would have fired me. They ended up stiffing me, leaving no tip on a $200 check. Once they left, I realized the woman that gave me so much grief had left her phone. I took it and went out the back door to smoke a cigarette and try to calm down. Who the heck did that woman think she is? So I promptly turned off her phone, threw it in the trash compactor, and turned it on. She came back minutes later and asked multiple staff members if we found it. I told her that I didn't see it when I bussed the table, and that I would call her if it turned up. I never told anyone, but I never regretted doing it. When you treat people like crud, expect cruddy things to happen to you. Well, that seems a bit overboard. I'd caution the original poster not to make a habit of this. She could easily get fired, and possibly wind up in legal trouble. The way Karen treated her is inexcusable, but a phone still costs more than what she lost on her tip. She's not a hero. That said, she's right that it's unfair to not let employees call out a woman like this Karen on her behavior. If you know you aren't going to get tipped anyway, you should at least be allowed to give the customer a piece of your mind. My entitled ex thinks I'm a bad father. All I said was that his mother doesn't love him. My ex-wife and I married in 2010 and had our child a couple of years later. After giving birth, my wife started seeing a friend of mine, so we divorced. She and my friend are now married with 2 kids of their own. I've been a single dad ever since, and she is still active in our son's life. She visits him twice a week. My son has never gone to her house. She's tried to get him to go, but he doesn't want to. My son gets hurt every time she comes over, because he would like her to stay a little longer, but she always leaves after 2 hours. The last time, my son started crying after she left, and I comforted him because he was wondering why his mom didn't love him when she does love his half-siblings. I said, "Don't worry, Starlight, you have me. I love you more than life itself. I know that no human is capable of loving you the way I love you. Your siblings will never be loved the way you are. You don't need her." That drew a big smile on my boy's face. My son will turn 10 soon, and I intend to throw a party. My ex called my son to let him know that she will be bringing the cake, and my son replied, "You can just send it, Mom." "Don't you want me there?" she asked. "My dad is right," he said. "No one needs you, not even me." Then he hung up. She called me furious. She said I've been poisoning my son against her, and that I've brainwashed him. She also said she'll come to the party whether I want it or not, because this is her child, and the fact that she doesn't live with him doesn't make her love him any less. I never said she couldn't come to the party. My mother says I shouldn't have said what I said, because a child always needs their mom. My ex-mother-in-law called me a jerk for attempting to destroy their relationship by pushing all of those crazy ideas on him, and even accused me of using my son as a weapon to remind my ex what she did in the past. The woman even used the cliché of telling me to grow up. So am I the jerk? is you don't need her that bad. So you not only let the kid believe his mother doesn't love him, but you also went as far as to say that she doesn't love her other children either? Yeah, you're not a jerk, you're a manipulator. Just because the kid was smiling doesn't mean he isn't being abused by a father who thinks he can control his son's emotions. Not only are you teaching him to hate his own mother without even asking why she leaves after 2 hours, but you're teaching him to be the kind of entitled little jerkhole who would treat a person like garbage and still demand they send him cake. Someone who thinks that growing up is a cliche probably shouldn't be raising children. Honestly, I don't know if the kid would be worse off if your ex-wife made you a nice big cup of tea. But maybe I'm wrong about this. What do you in the comments think? Did the mother overreact, or is this OP really brainwashing his kid? Leave us a comment and let us know who you think is the jerk in this situation. Click one of the videos on screen right now.